Hi folks, it's Chris here, and we're looking again at paper 1 for the EDEXCEL GCSE English Language spec, and we're going to focus in on question 4 just now. There is a matching video which will deal with question 3 in more detail, and those are the two questions that really you need to spend your time on when doing the reading section in paper 1. As you know, paper 1 consists of fiction and imaginative writing, as it says here, and you've got an hour and 45 minutes. We're going to be using the text that came from the June exam of 2017. And what you're finding is that the imaginative writing, which is basically writing a story based on questions 5 and 6, is two options. You're going to choose one and you're going to get 40 marks out of that story, or there's 40 marks available for that story, which means you're probably going to spend around about an hour on that question. That gives you around about 45 minutes, give or take a few minutes, to do your best with the 19th century fiction that will come with that. 19th century fiction could be Dickens, it could be Mary Shelley, Dracula, Frankenstein, Oliver Twist, those kind of authors from the 1800s. So we need to make sure that within that space of time you are using your time very, very wisely, and you want to sort of make sure that you're aware of how the paper flows. So as we know, there is one text for the reading section and it's got 4 questions. Questions 1 and 2 will always be that basic comprehension question. They're only worth 3 marks. So that's going to be a couple of minutes, but they can help a little bit. Question 3 is always that language and structure question. It's worth 6 marks. The other video focuses in on how to answer that. What you'll find is, so by all means watch that video first before you come into this one. What you'll find is those 6 marks, however, can be really, really important. And we find that most people who don't quite get the grade 4 often miss out by just a handful of marks, maybe 5, 6, 7 marks. So getting the best out of paper 1, where you've probably got a little bit more time on your hands to get the 6 marks that's available in question 3, and then do very well with the 15 marker in question 4, where you have to evaluate things, can often be the difference between making or break your overall scores. Now question 5 and 6 on that paper will always be the story there, the imaginative writing, and hopefully you're looking to be averaging across this paper a little over half marks. The grade 4 average generally is around about 50-52%, something like that, so you want to be scoring over half marks at least for all of these questions. In terms of what we're looking at like we said, the 2017 paper, which is the Wilkie Collins, and we're going to focus in on question 4 today. So what do we know about the question 4? Well, we know it's about evaluating an idea. So you have to make sure that you're answering the question carefully. Read the question carefully. You have to evaluate, but usually it's got something specific that you're evaluating. You're now using the whole text, where question 3 had line references, question 4 you're using the full text. You know you need to write probably a paragraph on each of the 4 things: setting, imagery, themes and events. And that acronym is known as CITE, S-I-T-E. I've gone with imagery here instead of ideas. Some people will tell you that it's setting, ideas, themes and events, but people really struggle to pick apart what an idea is and what a theme is. So what I tend to focus in on is the setting, the imagery, the themes and the events. Now what you will find with this is that not all texts have all 4 things about them that you probably want to focus in. So some texts might not have really much of a setting that you need to look at. Some texts might not have that many events that you need to look at. It's basically a framework. So when you're sitting there with a lot of white space in front of you and 15 marks to try and achieve, if you do me a paragraph on each of those 4 things and you've got that in your head, I need to do something on setting, something on imagery, something on themes, it will give you a framework of the kind of things that you need to look at. It happens that this text you could probably write a significant amount on all 4 things, so it's quite convenient. One of the other things that we see is that people do question 3, often spend a lot of time on it, run out of time or speed and energy to do question 4. But actually what you've written in question 3, which as I refer to is in the other video, you will often be able to find is useful in question 4. So don't ignore what you've just written in question 3. if you've got nothing else to write, literally lift it out of there and try and make it apply somehow to what is in this question. They're usually linked. They're usually very, very linked. Now, you also know that you have to word the question in a particular way. We need to be using evaluative language, which basically means you're telling me how well something has happened, how successful the author has been in achieving an effect, which makes it a little bit like marking, in this instance, Wilkie Collins' homework. You can assume that they've done it quite well. This is a GCSE text that has been hand-picked because of its qualities, which means you're probably going to be able to be positive about it. Don't tell me that they're not doing it, they're not achieving an effect very well. So try and be positive, and we're going to try and look at ways that we can show you how to do that. We also think that it's probably wise for you to take something from the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now, the text has been deliberately hand-picked, as I say. That can also mean that you need to be finding something in that first paragraph. Just if all else fails and you really don't know what to say, isolate the first paragraph, pull it apart, you'll find something in there. And we'll look at the kind of things that you can see there. Just make sure that you're answering the question is the key point in here. A lot of people, especially with question 3, but also in question 4, have a set amount of things that they think they need to talk about. Try and make sure that you've read the question carefully. Don't assume you know what the question is. Read it carefully. So, looking at it, what we can see is a question that will usually follow this kind of format. In this extract, there is an attempt to, and then that can often be create some mystery, create some tension, or show something. So make sure that you're aware of what it is that they're trying to show you. That will often be changeable, but it's often linked to question 3 as well. So it's worth 15 marks. That means that you're not going to get away with just a couple of lines here. It'll really kill your marks if you do that. Try and spend focus your time on this question rather than on question 3. It's in this instance we're looking at the sense of mystery, and we have to make sure we're using evaluative language. The text which I've read out in question 3's video, in the other video, is from The Woman in White, and it's by Wilkie Collins, and it's basically where a guy is walking along at 1 o'clock in the morning along a road, and he walks past this hedge, and eventually someone stands out and touches him on his shoulder. She doesn't call out to him, she puts a hand on his shoulder, and he turns and she says, "Is that the road to London?" And then he basically just looks at her. So what I would like you to do is read it carefully and find me some good words and phrases. Think about CITE setting. What is the setting? Think about the images. In terms of the figurative language, when we talk about imagery, we're talking about metaphors and similes and good use of words and phrases, and maybe it's not literal language. What images have been used in there? Pause the screen and give it a read if you haven't already, and just make sure you're familiar with it. We also then have the second half of it down here. Again, pause the screen and give it a read. Look for the imagery, the themes, the events. Think about what you might have written in question 3 as well. And the final section is where he eventually walks away from her completely confused. So where is that? Where do you see that? So pause the screen where you can. Okay, so now that I can assume that you've read that text carefully, we can look at a few key things. What did we say that we needed to look at? We had to look at how you're evaluating an idea. Make sure you're looking at the sense of mystery when you read it. You're using the entire text. So take something from that end page, take something from the middle slide, take something from the starting slide. That's the easiest way of looking at it. We're going to do a paragraph on setting, imagery, themes, and events. Make sure that if you've answered question 3, you don't just ignore all of that good stuff that you've used in there. Use it in here as well. Don't forget to be marking his homework sort of thing. Use that evaluative language and tell me how well something is happening. Start, middle, and end, and making sure that you're answering the question. So there's the question again, and it's worth 15 marks. That's what it's going to look like. Where is the sense of mystery? So when we look at the setting, what we see is that it's in the dead of night. It's in a lonely place. It's in a broad, bright high road. we need to look at some of the quotes that identify those things. So we're going to look for those. The imagery. Every drop of blood in his body is brought to a standstill. Find me some of the words that show me that. From an imagery point of view, she is also dressed in white. What does white suggest? So quite often white people get married in white. It suggests purity and innocence potentially, but it has also got potentially a ghostly feel to it. Is there anything along those lines in there? And what supports that? She is referred to as an apparition, an extraordinary apparition. And she is sprung out of the heaven and the earth. So refer to those phrases. That's the imagery that we're looking for. Themes-wise, there is a real sense of confusion. If you've done question 3, and ideally I would like you to have watched that video, in question 3, there is a real worry in him. He doesn't trust her, which is an idea that goes right the way through it. That means that's a theme. There is a real sense of confusion from start to finish, which builds the sense of mystery. That is therefore also a theme. He doesn't trust her. He's analysing her. He stands there. She goes, is that the way to London? Then he turns and he looks and he looks and he looks and he looks and he's just analysing it. And there's a massive big passage of text where he is just analysing it. And then she says again, is that the way to London? And she almost snaps him out of it. And then the events. So from an events point of view, why did she put a hand on his shoulder? Why didn't she just say, excuse me? Why was she hiding in a hedge? Why was she there at 1 o'clock in the morning? Again, these are points that if you were a detective, you would be saying these are quite mysterious things that are occurring. So let's look again. So looking at the setting, we have the middle of the broad, bright high road. We've got a dark cloud over London, which has got pathetic fallacy. It feels ominous. We've got the dead of night in the lonely place. These are all setting quotes that you can use in your answer to suggest that it was a bit mysterious, it was a bit ominous, it was a bit dark and spooky, and it felt like something was going to go wrong. We then also have the imagery. Every drop of blood in my body was brought to a stop. So it's a heart-stopping moment. It literally didn't stop, but it suggests that's what's happened. It almost had a heart attack. My fingers tightening around the handle of his stick suggests tension. He's gripping his stick because he's had such a surprise. As if she has sprung out of the earth and dropped from the heaven. She hasn't really. Obviously, she's come out of a hedge. But it felt like she appeared out of nowhere. Now, did she come out of hell or drop from heaven? He's unsure. But that is still kind of that sort of ghostly imagery. The solitary figure of someone dressed in white is also quite ghostly. And we've got this extraordinary apparition. If you have an apparition, you have a vision or a ghost appears to you. That's what an apparition is. So a lot of the words there are synonymous with the supernatural potentially, and also suggest that he has really had a massive surprise, which are all building to that sense of mystery. Themes wise, we've got a hand laid lightly. Why did she do that? We've also got that he recurs to the fact that he just can't account for it, and he was so suddenly startled by it. He got such a fright, which is a mystery. Did you hear me? She said. So what you're noticing is that this long passage here is effectively this. I looked attentively at that whole paragraph is his internal dialogue. His mind is whirring. He's thinking and analysing very, very fast to try and get a picture of who she is, why she's there, and he just cannot understand it. He doesn't really come to a conclusion about her. So from a themes point of view, she repeats the question, and she also says, you know, this sense of confusion, this sense of not trusting her. She says, you don't suspect me of doing anything wrong, do you? So this is all the stuff that you've mentioned in question 3, but she's protesting a bit too much. He didn't say that she'd done anything wrong, but she's defending herself from the beginning, which makes you feel like she's done something wrong and you're suspicious of her. She shrank back from me several paces, which means she steps away from him, almost a little bit of fear. What is she afraid of? And we kind of come to the conclusion that she's hiding. What is she hiding there? We also notice that at the top of this page it says, pray don't suppose I have any idea of suspecting you or any other. So he's trying to reassure her. He's reassuring her. She stepped out and surprised him, but he's the one who is reassuring her that he's of no danger to her, which is odd. So the whole scene is quite odd and builds a sense of mystery. And she says that she doubted and feared until he had passed. But then he is left. So the passage ends with two rhetorical questions where he is just as confused at the end as he was at the beginning. He doesn't understand. There is no conclusion. He still does not understand. Steal after me and touch me. Why not? Why not call to me? As in, why didn't you just say, excuse me, or make yourself known earlier, rather than let someone pass and then put your hand on your shoulder? These are all the kind of things that build a sense of mystery, but are all the kind of things that I would be looking for you to pull out and talk about, or talk around in terms of how she's acted and why that builds a sense of mystery. So by way of the question, there's a specific way that we need to do it. We need to make sure we're always talking about mystery. Everything that you write down, try and bring it back to mystery. Make sure that you're using evaluative language, and make sure that you do enough to get 15 marks. The way that we phrase that doesn't have to be particularly complicated. So instead, the writer successfully builds the sense of mystery by using the setting. The setting of a lonely place in the dead of night works well. So in red, we've got our evaluative language to build a sense of, and in green, isolation and loneliness, which is your explanation and is your analysis. The pathetic fallacy of the moonlight and the dark cloud over London build that mysterious, ominous feel. So in green, we're explaining why that is building a sense of mystery, because it's isolated and lonely and mysterious and ominous. And that will get you a few extra marks. So it makes it quite surprising then that the man realizes he's not alone. The writer effectively uses imagery. So he's now using it. If we look at the imagery, which is just the words and phrases, the metaphors, by building the sense of mystery by really highlighting the heart-stopping moment with every drop of blood brought to a stop. Images such as sprung out of the earth and dropped from the heaven. You'll also notice that every sentence that I'm writing here has really got quotes in it. Tell me a quote, explain it. Tell me a quote, explain what it does. Okay, suggests a ghostly or supernatural feel, effectively highlighting, show how sudden the woman's appearance is, which is mysterious. So every sentence is kind of linked to that sense of mystery. The fact she is dressed in a gown all of white further underpins the supernatural and ghostly feel, and she's referred to as an apparition. A few other things. We've got the theme of confusion to show that sense of mystery. So everything that you've written in question 3 is probably relevant here, but in short, the theme of confusion shows it's clear the man does not understand how she got there. He's confused, he's worried, he doesn't trust her, and he's unable to account. He just does not know how she got there, which is very clear from the narrator. The woman also asks the question twice, because she asks the question and then it goes into that internal monologue where he's just staring at her and he's slack-jawed and he's mesmerized. That builds a sense of mystery. That's kind of the structural point that you might have taken from question 3, where the long sentences shows it, but that builds a sense of mystery. And the woman acts very strangely, which heightens a sense of mystery as she suspiciously insists she is innocent and has hidden before risking putting her hand out lightly on his shoulder. So that's kind of the events, isn't it? In terms of what actually happened, that's odd. And then it ends with those two rhetorical questions, which just concludes that he has no conclusion. Steal after me and touch me, why not call to me? And that highlights the confusion and strangeness of the scene. So we've got lots of points in there that you can talk about. That's the kind of depth. It's not particularly complicated to just take a quote and give me a quick sentence about it. You can explain it a little bit more. That's the bare bones of the kind of explanation I'd be looking for you to do. So what I want you to do is to now have a go wherever possible. Give it a write-up and just try and follow that format using CITE, CITE, and using evaluative language and making sure that you're explaining those bits, explaining those quotes and taking a bit from the beginning, the middle and the end. Okay, thanks folks.